Thanks for everyone for joining today. I am Elizabeth Allen. I am the Education and Outreach Chair for the Idaho Chapter American Planning Association. And this is our Voices in Planning webinar series. Today we have Jerome Mapp. He is the Planning and Zoning Director for the City of Caldwell. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat or the question and answer box, and we'll try to get to them at the end. So to start out, Jerome, if you could tell us your story, going back as far as you like, to how you got to where you are today.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Won't go back too far, only 40 years, but originally from Chicago, came to Idaho in 1969 to pursue a degree in architecture. And, first time really outside of the Midwest. I went through the program. In my senior year, I joined University Year for Action. And I wanted, in doing so, I decided that I would go for pursue a degree in sociology. So I dropped my last two architectural classes and spent the next year pursuing that degree. As part of being with the University Year for Action, the director, who happened to be also on the city council for Boise, for Pocatello, assigned me to the city of Pocatello to basically help the city. I was only I guess I would say I was an intern working for the city for 15 hours a week. And I was assigned to the traffic engineering department. I did that for about 6 months and then moved on to work study. I did that for a year and had a number of tasks, worked for the city. And in October 1974, I was hired to start the planning department for the city of Pocatello. So that's why I got into planning, very short description of that. So I worked with the city for 7 years. The best thing about working for the city was that I got the chance to do everything. Starting with the experience with the traffic engineer, which required me to review all the traffic accidents and the reasons why the accidents happened, really guided me in just how the city functioned. And actually I used that skill many times during my career as it dealt with traffic movement, ingress, egress, why there's accidents, etc. But I got my architecture degree and sociology degree in 1975. And so I worked with the city for those 7 years. We were experiencing a lot of growth as we are doing here in the Treasure Valley. My assignment was that we went to a special census. So my responsibility was to develop all the census tracts. And basically that was the foundation for the city to track their statistics for the next 30 years. I was involved in the airport with architectural background. I was designing or drawing hangar locations. I did some transportation planning. Did my first comp plan. Responsible for the designer, responsible for design review, but mainly developing a housing plan for the city back in 1975. So we had our first mall, so I was responsible reviewing that. Landscaping, it did not turn out the way we wanted it. And so really everything that I learned was a foundation for my future activities and planning. I was responsible for all the building permits that came in for residential and commercial buildings by reviewing the plans, landscaping plans, design, and signing off on them. One thing I can't forget that I was responsible for design review, not design review, for the Plan and Zoning Commission and for the first hearing examiner with the City of Caldwell. Actually, that was the first hearing examiner in the state of Idaho. And who would know that some 30 plus years later, I would be the hearing examiner for not only the City of Caldwell, but for Canyon County. So a short list. I came to Boise in 1980 as a space planning supervisor, which got me back into the architectural side. But I learned more about space planning, interior design. I was responsible for the entire Capitol Mall and the state office buildings throughout Idaho, responsible for relocation in the Capitol Mall for all the various departments, manage their space, making sure that their needs were met. The key to that experience really was working on a number of design projects, such as the Morrison Center. I was responsible for working with the design team on that building. I managed Alexander House when that was being remodeled. There are just various state structures throughout Idaho. The first recession that hit for me was in 1981 during the oil embargo. We lost 25% of our leases in the Capitol Mall, and I was responsible to rent that space to other state agencies or government agencies in the mall. I contacted those different groups and agencies. Actually, I filled it up 100%. But as I was going through that process, they had major layoffs, and I was one of them. So I got laid off. But then having a family of three and had to have a job, I started my business. At that time, I called it planning and building management because I was still working with some departments in the state and relocating them to other buildings. And so I was doing that, doing some drafting work with architects and engineers. And then that fall, about October, I was hired as a design review analyst for the City of Boise. So that was my first time working for the City of Boise. I worked there 3 years as a design review analyst. During the latter part of that recession. The keynote for that time was that the mall was still being proposed for downtown. And a lot of the community and the development community wanted the mall to be out where it's located now. But BRA, which was forefront of the CCDC, the mandate for the council, the mayor and the council, and EDA was for the mall to be downtown. Um, that proposed mall was similar to what you may find in Spokane and Salem. Kind of had the same concept, Oregon. I was tired and frustrated. My career wasn't moving as fast as I wanted, and I applied for a job in California with the California State University system, and I got hired there in 1985 in October. I was responsible for all the planning and design projects for 5 universities in California. And many that meant if they were looking at building a new structure, they would contact me and I would work with them through the design process for those buildings. At the same time, they were looking at expanding the system to add 5 new universities in the state of Idaho. So I got in on the front end of that in the month of October when I started. Unfortunately, or fortunately, 1 month after I got there, I lost my voice, and it was a whisper. And I left there after 11 months and came back home to Boise. When I came back, I started my business again, planning and facility management. Started doing projects here. My first one was the Bass Block. I did the master plan for the Bass Block. The second project was St. Luke's. They were contemplating they'll be doing some expansions, and they asked me to prepare an ordinance that could be adopted by the city of Boise for a health service zone. So I developed that, and it was adopted in the city ordinance. So as I continued to work for some different cities, I just worked with the state of Idaho doing troubleshooting on some of the grants that had been completed but had not been closed out. So I traveled to different parts of the state, closing out those projects. I also had the opportunity to write the first homeless grant that the state of Idaho received. So I was doing that work, becoming a certified grant administrator as I was working there. I got hired as the executive director of the Elmo County Impact Steering Committee in Mountain Home. The plan was that the Air Force was going to expand the air base at Mountain Home. We started doing planning for that growth to happen. And 5 months later, the Air Force decided they were going to close the base. So we had to change our direction. We were still planning for growth in the idea of updating their zoning and their comprehensive plans for the city and the county. But the shift was now more economic development since people weren't coming. What were we supposed to do? So it was decided that they would hire someone more in economic development in real estate. So I left that group, went back work for myself, doing various projects throughout the state of Idaho. And I got hired as a community development specialist with Idaho Planning and Development. That caused me to switch and my attention more to rural Idaho. where I wrote grants and managed grants for downtown revitalization projects, sewer and water projects for cities. One of my first projects with them is that I did the master plan for Eagles downtown that was implemented. We wrote a grant and we received the grants to do some improvements and designate the area for downtown Eagle. And then the second one also was on downtown, was the city of Cascade. And I wrote the grant and managed that. It was not only a architectural design project, it was an infrastructure project and an economic development project. 25% of the buildings in downtown Cascade were empty. And so we did the plan, sidewalks, curb and gutter, street lights, and just kind of changed the philosophy as well as the interest in the city citizens that we can make a difference. The project was completed. 1 year after the project was completed, the vacancy rate was 0. So we felt pretty good about that. Other projects in my major territory was Highway 55. So I did sewer water projects and comp plan zoning orders, subdivision ordinance for the city of Horseshoe Bend, water project for Donnelly, infrastructure sewer project in McCall, and work with them on their comprehensive plan as well. I started that in 1992. In 1993, there was an announcement that the 2 council members were leaving the city council, and the mayor was searching for 2 individuals to serve on it, to be appointed and serve on the city council. So after spending some time in Horseshoe Bend that day, on the next to the last day, I turned my application in to be considered to be appointed to the city council. There were 64 candidates, and I was one of the 2. So that was the beginning of another chapter in my life. I was still working for Idaho for another 4 years, I believe. And there was an opening at the Association of Idaho Cities for a position that was director of planning, which I did take. And I worked with them for a year, and they had some budget issues, so I left that. And that's when I started doing my consulting business full time. But going back to city council, appointed in 93, served till 2006. In my presentation to the city council, I was actually going to focus on the need for affordable housing. But the first thing I wanted to talk about was something that was dear to me, and that was light rail and regional transportation. So as we talk about light rail today, I spoke of that in 1993. When I did, I had people laughing at me for talking about such nonsense that we did not have the population. Well, at the time, the population in Boise was only 90,000 people. At least for me, you can see the handwriting on the wall that we weren't going to stay there. We were starting to grow, in Boise more than other parts of the valley, because at the time, Boise was 90, Marin was 11,000 people. I think Napa was somewhere about 15, and Caldwell was probably, uh, 20 or 15, 20, but very small. Um, we were growing by leaps and bounds. That's the reason why I placed my name in consideration, because I had already gone through one growth spurt in Pocatello that I was focused back on planning. And I saw the need, from my point of view, that they need to have a city planner with experience in dealing with growth and change that the other council members didn't have. The mayor, Rick Coles, was a planner that I worked for when I worked for the city of Boise in the 80s, but it was more administration type background. Sarah Baker, who was on the council at that time, was more in community development and actually land planning and growth. And so that's why I did that. During that time on the council, and I'll make this short, I just had a number of successes, I think. And I think we'll talk about that later on in some of the other questions. But it was a good experience. So I continue to work with myself with cities throughout the area. This position with the City of Caldwell, I came as in 2019 to help out because one of the staff members of the legislature and the city asked me if I could just help out a couple of months later. Receive leaves the legislature for that session. Director retired and went to another location in April. I was asked to be the acting director. After a month, I decided I would apply for the position, and that's how I'm here today. So that's the long and short of it. I'm sorry it took too long.
Oh, that was fine. Thank you for sharing. You've had so much experience, and it's interesting to hear how what you saw in the 80s or 90s is repeating itself right now.
Yeah, actually, there's a number of things that I talked about in those days that are kind of coming to fruition now.
Right. So the next question we have are, what are some leadership principles that you have discovered over the years that have contributed to your success?
Something I learned a long time ago is that whatever position you have, you're not too good to do other things. And I learned this in the beginning that'll clarify it in a very simple way. We had a Pocatello, we had a hearing, and the hearing, the council chambers was filling up, and we were short of chairs. The planning director, and only the planning director, got up, gave citizens his chair, and went out to get other people chairs so they could sit at the hearing. Seeing that, I did the same thing. No other department head budged not one bit. That one lesson taught me is that if something needs to be done and you can do it, do it. Your title doesn't define what your responsibilities are in your position working for actually anybody, especially for local government. That issue of service just means that if you have the opportunity to make a difference in someone's lives, you do it. And that's how I carry myself throughout my career.
What are your success habits?
Um, Success habits uh, really mean that there's there are many challenges, and there's situations, especially as a consultant, that you may not know how to process or do something. But if you put your mind to what the goal is, you can find your way to do it. Um, I see in doing downtown revitalization projects, there are so many obstacles in the development of downtown Boise. People who have not been here don't know what it looked like 4 years ago. And there was a number of people saying that you can't do this, you can't do that. But the idea that I try to bring um, into that discussion was that, what do we want to do? If that's what we want to do, let's find ways how to do it. Now, it's easy to say, well, we can't do it and drop the ball. But the challenge and the success is the accomplishment when you get it done. Um, One of the things I tried to do when I was in the city council, and I preach this all the time, was that at least in 1993, uh, the councils throughout the valley, mayors and city council, did not know each other. I knew all the mayors and city council members because working with Idaho, all the cities were under our purview because they were small cities at the time. And so I would meet with mayors and city councils about economic development projects, infrastructure projects, etc. And I was surprised that there was no interaction between the bodies in this valley. And so I advocated that we start doing that. Mayor Cole started, um, I forget what they called it, Treasure Valley Partnership, where all the mayors met monthly to talk about common issues. All our issues in this valley are the same thing. We have different populations. We're all seeking economic development. We're all dealing with planning growth and development. If we put our minds together, hopefully we can solve the issues that we're dealing with valley-wide, not just one city. I said that in my presentation to the council, that Boise is not an island. What affects Boise affects Napa. What affects Napa affects Kuna and Star. And so the list goes on.
All right, so I'll go to another one of the questions we had prepared, and then I think I might go to some of the question and answers that we have.
Sorry, say that again.
I'm going to go through another one of our questions that we prepared.
Okay.
I'm going to go to some of the audience questions. So looking back on your journey and know what you know today, what is one piece of advice that you would have given yourself along the way?
Patience. As I mentioned about frustration, as you see other people's careers moving forward and you start comparing yourself to other folks, that's the worst thing you can do. Because if you can compare yourself to someone else, you don't know their circumstances, you know nothing about them. Focus on your career. Be prepared for opportunities that come before you. When something like even another job opportunity comes and you say to yourself, well, I don't know how to do that. find out how to do it. You know, when you're applying for a job, let them tell you that you're not qualified. Don't you tell yourself that you're not qualified. I think it's just that simple.
That's great. So how have you endured the politics of the job for so long?
Say that one again.
How have you endured the politics of the job, and how have you endured the frustrations of change in leadership of the mayor and, say, city council?
Here or there or anywhere.
I'd say anywhere.
I don't never naturally care for politics. Even though I did that, I cared more about getting the job done. And so the politics are just part of the process. You know, you have to be aware of who your boss is. In my position, is the mayor of city council. I have one goal, and that goal is to leave the city I'm working for better than what I came. It's not saying that you know, I'm gonna take over this or that, but in those decisions that are being made, you would hope that those decisions are going to be a betterment to the community that you're serving. And you know, I've worked with, like I said, I've worked with mayors and councils during my entire career, and I've tried to give them the best advice that I have. You know, it's definitely a lot easier when you talk to your smaller communities and you've been a city council member and you've been in the business for 30 or 40 years. They might take your counsel a little bit better, but confidence comes with working with people in the community. I give an example is as the director of planning for the city of director of planning for Association of Idaho Cities. I got a phone call from the citizens of Star, and they said they wanted to be incorporated, and it was my task to help them. So I didn't know how to incorporate a city, but it's written in the Idaho Code, and so I read the code. I contacted the county commissioners, and between the three of us, because one council commissioner wasn't involved, it was Roger Simmons and Vern Visterfeld and myself. And I went through the code and corrected them of what the process was to incorporate the city of Star. And in about 5 months, they were a new city, the last city incorporated in the state of Idaho, number 200. So that's what I mean about it. If you don't know, you know, figure out how to get it done. Mm-hmm. And so working with cities, that was never my intention in life, but that's where my life was directed to go. And so I appreciate all the opportunity I have had over the years to shape almost 50 cities in the state of Idaho.
All right, so someone's asking that, so you made a comment about how you had looked forward to the future for the need of light rail to accommodate the growth that would come. Mm-hmm. What do you think planners in Idaho need to be focused on in order to prepare for the future?
Good question. For me, is having that vision, I've recognized that I've kind of had these different thoughts over the years about where we need to go in the future. And for me, I'm ahead of some other folks, elected officials and community leaders. My mind is ahead of them. Not saying that I'm any better, but it's you have to nurture other folks to move forward. This issue we're dealing with housing, as I said, I was going to bring that issue up in '93, and now it's a major issue. The way you do it, I believe, is that finding individuals that can share the vision, spread the seeds throughout the community. Some will drop where they can be fruitful. Others will not. A lot of people, the first thought they think about is the cost. But the first step really is the idea and planning how you get there. If we were able to agree that in some day we will have light rail in the Treasure Valley, we could have redesigned how we expanded our interstate system. We could have changed how we would look at our major roadways that covered the entire valley from Boise to Caldwell, like Shannon Boulevard, like Houston, like Victory Road, I think it's another one. In our housing situation, now the city of Boise is looking at building residential at the old Grand Central Fred Meyers off of Overland and Orchard. You know, a lot of that planning could have gone on years ago. But once again, we have people who don't believe that there's a need. No, I don't believe that we should be spending money that way. But if people analyze where we're going as a community, some of those things are quite evident of where we should be considering. The mall is another example, but that's another story.
Thank you. So what would you consider to be your greatest professional accomplishment?
Been in this business for over 40 years. There's not one single one. I think the idea of me doing this for over 40 years and not charting this out as a career is an accomplishment right there. The pieces as I look back on this question were just the things that built on one success after another, like the Bass Block. We had an idea, and it took 10 years for it to be built, but now it's known around the world. It's a destination. Little things like all our city parks have a park sign, and they have an address. Before 1994, there were no addresses on any of the park signs. And I advocated that, we should be putting addresses. And they may not seem to be a big thing, but I've had people compliment by saying, I was looking for this park, especially new people. And it gave me the address where it was, knowing before that would not have happened. Capitol Boulevard. John Bertram did the original plan of Capitol Boulevard, but then I formed a committee in '98 of architects and property owners, and we looked at the next step for Capitol. And one of the key things that I brought up was that when you walk down Capitol, the sidewalks were only like 5 feet wide, and people had to walk, stop and let somebody pass. And it was hot as Hades walking on Capitol Boulevard. When you walk Capitol Boulevard, the sidewalk was right off the street. And so it felt more dangerous than what it may be. And the landscaping we felt wasn't adequate. So one of the things that I wanted to see was 10-foot sidewalks separated from the street with the median and a canopy of trees. So when they finally grew, that we would have a shaded area that people could use Capitol Boulevard. And didn't get a lot of support for it either, especially from the state of Idaho. But as it developed, it happened on Capitol. We see that has happened. Jerry Armstrong came up with the idea of the gated areas going towards Moto and the landscaping in that. He had that concern. We wanted to redirect Capitol Boulevard so it was straight, but ACHD wouldn't go for that, for that. So, it's thinking outside the box. There's a lot of things in the community that need to be done that are small that can make a big difference. And many times we kind of look at these big things instead of taking these smaller steps that finally create what your vision was originally.
All right. So while you were working in Pocatello, did you work with the tribal leadership at all, or with the reservation lands?
No, that was there's definitely separate entity, and I remember in 1974, the Local Land Use Planning Act. The act was 75, I think. So we were doing planning before the act went into place. Mm-hmm. And a lot of cities did not even have comprehensive plans. So way before that time.
Right. So I think we touched a little bit on this earlier, but do you have any other tips on how you can stay positive and engaged despite officials not seeing the vision or timely taking steps that would have resulted in better conditions than we have now with land use, community development, and transportation improvements?
Well, I think as we can tell with light rail, it takes time. So I think some of the things that's even happening now, where we didn't have Idaho Smart Growth, the different planning organizations and groups that we have now, we didn't have back in the 90s. And so the collaboration, I think, can be between individuals in various departments from different cities to collaborate. I think having workshops, bringing like-minded citizens on board to discuss those issues, they can bring them to the forefront. Sometimes staff may have an idea that just can't get past the planning office or get to the city council. but the community leaders could bring those ideas forward sometimes. Developing partnerships with those people who may not feel that they have a voice. When we lost Amtrak, I had a number of people who came to me about how can we get Amtrak back, and trying to do the research and talking to individuals and have to inform them that, you know, it's not likely today. Also, it's important to bring in those other agencies that will benefit from the idea that you have, and sit down talking to them. It may be something informal like lunch, but the idea is that ideas that stay in your head, stay in your head. You have to share those, even when people may laugh and think they're ridiculous. You know, that you have to be able to go out and put yourself out there to get that thought. As I mentioned, you're dropping seeds, and some of them will sprout.
Great. So I think we kind of just touched on this a little bit. Have you found any effective ways of engaging the public with planning? So updating a comp plan, for example, before a specific land use matter shows up in their backyard?
You know, neighborhood associations, and I always have had mixed feelings about that, only because most associations have been established to be against something than for things. One of the key things I've learned is that in dealing with Veterans Park Neighborhood Association is a good one, at least for me, because we went in there. I was working with neighborhood housing, and the issue was that there were a lot of rentals, and we worked up a neighborhood plan, and we brought to the city. The issue in many cases were repairs of existing homes. But I think finding out from the people in their neighborhood what their common issue is. The reason why people are against different projects is because of the unknown. And we started neighborhood meetings, and that helps. But letting them understand of how the planning process works. What are the things that are they concerned about? That's a first step. Something we didn't do, which I wish we did, was getting the schools involved from all levels. I think we did something at Roosevelt Elementary where they kind of planned what their future Boise would look like. You know, there's a lot of people, and if you think about it, there's a lot of people in the community that don't get involved. And the reason why they don't get involved is because they haven't been asked. So engaging those community members in a way that is not based upon the public hearing is to do outreach in the community. And I don't know how we do it when we're doing all these other things, but that would be a challenge that I would state with any city, is to do outreach in the community before we have that major issue.
Right. So what tips do you have for planners who are just beginning their career?
Uh, Basic word is learn, not being afraid to try. One thing is unique, and I try to do this here in my office, and I learned this in working with Pocatello. As a new planner, you're going to make mistakes, but the response of the leadership is key. Um, don't remember what the issue was, but I made a mistake. City manager and I talked about it, and he said, "What did you learn from it?" And I told him, said, "Okay, that's it." So there was no chastising, making someone feel that they did something wrong, because it's all in the learning process. And so the idea of for a new planner, and you have so much more than what we had when we got started. Um, if you want to learn about PUDs, go online and read about it. Buy a book and read about it. Uh, One thing you could do is you could have we did this once before, have a session um, every month where someone takes a topic and they do a little research on that and make a presentation. Um, that's how you learn by doing. All that you learn in school, that's good, but you don't learn any way except by doing it. You learn the good and you learn the bad that you don't do again.
All right. So, well, I guess the last one we'll do is what advice do you have for those who are feeling like they haven't found the right fit or considering applying for different positions?
Well, as I explained, I wanted to be an architect, and uh, nothing against architects because I've got some friends that practice right in the city. But I kind of learned this um, is that architects build buildings and planners build cities. We have a larger responsibility. And so, as I said, patience earlier is that a lot of times things don't feel like they're going your way, that you're not accomplishing what you have set out to do. The patient comes in where uh, if this is something you really want to do, then find a way to do it. Maybe that one position that you have doesn't suit you, maybe. But the question is, what are you learning from it? What are you learning to take to the next position? Each project I've worked on in the last 40 plus years, I've learned to be a better planner every single time. Even the ones that did not go the way I wanted to, I learned to do it better. I know that, we spend a lot of time planning our careers and our futures. But sometimes you have to go with the flow. And the flow, what I mean by that is we want to see the outcome versus seeing the process. And the process is being better at what you do every time you work on a project. Um, Working with a traffic engineer, for every Monday morning I went out and went to the police department and looked at traffic accidents or laying holes for traffic counts or sitting under a tree counting traffic with a traffic counter was the foundation of what I'm doing now. And it makes you to understand those issues that are coming up in the future. So the patience is that.
Thank you. So is there anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Well, let's see. As a city planner, and looking back over the years, I don't, there's no lows. They're just slowly emphasized in a manner of saying stairs. You just continue taking a step up until retirement. When you look back at it, and I'm repeating myself because it's so important, what did I do to make the community I'm working for better? Because if you're doing that, your knowledge is expanding. The direction you're going, as it helps the community, is also helping you. That's the advice I could just give.
That's great. Well, thank you for joining us today and sharing your insight and story.
Well, thanks for having me. This has been an experience.
It was an honor to talk to you today.
I like the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you have any additional questions, feel free to email me. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.